Assalamu alaikum. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. The President of Management Association of Pakistan, Senator Mr. Sarmad Ali, members of the Management Committee of the Management Association of Pakistan, thank you very much for inviting me to this convention of the early annual convention. We have had excellent presentations since morning. So what I would try to do is drive a wedge between hardcore facts conveyed through numbers by at least two speakers and the melodious presentation made by Ms. Hussaini. So I'll try and wedge and take you on a roller coaster ride of a very different thought altogether. And any of those who were sitting here and thinking of themselves as leaders, I'm sorry, I'm going to puncture that feeling for some period of time. And allow me to do that because when I was asked to speak here, I was told that I have to select a subject. So I said, what subject can I speak on? Is it about leading the change? Is it about the change itself? So I was left with the option. So I said, I wish to talk about the missing link. And they said, what's that? I said, so allow me to present that then. So here I am. Try and construct something for you. Remain with me. Now, is there anybody in this room who wishes to say that I do not wish to be a leader? Everybody wants to be a leader. There's hardly an individual, globally speaking, who doesn't wish to be a leader. Because the idea about leadership is so beautiful. It is so romanticized, just as romance has got several dimensions, nuances, manifestations, so is leadership. Meaning different thing to different people, depending on where you are placed. Somebody who is in a situation like Winston Churchill between 1939 and 1945 becomes a great leader. Although he had struggled all his life to become a leader. Situational demanded, and he created a leadership of his own. But he was good as a wartime leader. Britain refused to accept him second time around and rejected elections. Simple as that. So who is it that in the corporate sector would not like to become a leader? Because it gives a great sense of power. I am leading. I'm the one who's seeking the center stage, the spotlight. It is so beautiful to feel that way. No one wishing to take the back seat. It is so important to be in the center of the photograph that is being taken. It feels so good to sit on a chair with a little bit high back and be noticed. That's the beauty of leadership. And who does it to us? We are made leaders by people around us, and they are so good at it. They make you feel so, and you saw a demonstration of that a little while back. Okay, I've been spending some time with a belligerent chartered accountant in the last couple of weeks, so I hope you don't mind my getting a little belligerent in my expression. But yes, leadership is all about belligerence, defying, acting contrary to accepted norms. That's leadership, and you can then call it innovation if it succeeds. And should it fail, it will be consigned to history. Now, who creates leaders? Sycophants, who make you feel that you are a leader, although you may not be. What does it take to be a leader? It's something different. You've already cited so many of the characteristics that an individual must possess. What a superman he must be to possess all those characteristics to be called a leader. If you were to put all the leaders available here into a microscopic examination of the test that he has placed on all of us, I know for a fact that I shall fail miserably. Possibly not go beyond the second element on it. That's the scale we have. So how is it that people become leaders? It is because people are self-obsessed of their positions in life. So they are sticking to it. And what happens? It's particularly true of how leaders are created. Leaders are created through a process. It could be a de jure leadership where a board meets up to select a CEO of an organization and say, you lead this organization now. When that's happening, the question that must come to one's mind is that, is it the CEO's vision that will carry the organization, or is it the board's vision that will be carried forward? Is he merely an executor of somebody else's vision, or does he contribute to the vision of the organization? Undecided. Especially now, if I were to branch out and take you to a situation where there are family-operated businesses, where there is a person sitting as a result and a consequence of inherited leadership. Inheritance, ladies and gentlemen, regrettably, for all those who are into those positions, does not confer leadership qualities. Wisdom is not a vaccination that you can take and feel wiser. It has to be learned through the art of experience. And that is what distinguishes most of us in this current corporate and political world. In the political world, it's very easy to seek center stage, seek spotlight. But in the corporate sector, performance is what is demanded of an individual, and so much in terms of the characteristic that one is expected to display while leading people. Now, when you get beguiled, when you lead you astray by people around you who are basically yes men, or yes women, or yes persons, because everything they say is good. Okay, who makes it? It is the people around. And I must quote here something very important that I noticed, because I'm going to talk about arrogance. Because arrogance is closely associated with leadership. It immediately makes an individual feel important and therefore better than the others. It is better to be a leader than be led, isn't it? I don't think so. Any one of you will dispute that. It is so good to be leaders than be led by people. Why should I accept leadership of others when I can be a good leader myself? Okay. Arrogance is something that attacks, and therefore the man sitting in Washington, D.C. is usually considered by the world to be the most powerful leader of all sorts. That individual back in the 40s had a plaque placed on his table which said, "The buck stops here," and that was Harry Truman. What did he mean by buck stops here? That means the authority stops at the level of the President of the United States of America? Nay, that's not what he was referring to. He was referring to the fact that the buck has traveled several layers of the bureaucracy and has now landed upon my table. And if it is palatable, I shall endorse it and take full responsibility. When you bring in the element of responsibility into your position of authority, that is when you become a true leader. Devoid of it, it's a de jure position that you're carrying, and you may not have the wherewithal to be a leader. Therefore, we see in a group of people, a large number emerge as leaders. They are the de facto leaders of a group, without having been qualified or conferred with a title or a place. I think that is something very important for us. And all leaders must recognize, where are we placed on that scale? Am I one who is there because of a process of law that I've become the leader of people? Or have I made myself available in terms of my skills, talents, abilities, characteristics to be in a position to lead others? How does it work? Why is it not moving? Oh, it's faster, sorry. I hope you do understand what's a green room, the room behind the stage. Leadership actually resides there. The spotlight is here. The conductors have a back to the audience. The performers have a frontal view of the audience. But the performers of the orchestra will not move a step ahead until they receive the command from the conductor. So those placed in positions of being a conductor actually must recognize that they are there because of a lot of people around them who are writing the script, which is the vision. There are people who are implementing that script, who are your workers. All of them have catapulted you into a position of leadership. You are not a leader, sorry. They are the leaders who are driving the change. You are implementing a vision of the board of directors. You could add your little 2 bits to it, your 2 cents to it, but it's actually the vision of the man who has thought about the corporate sector, or where he wishes to place his company into the profiling of the industry. That's the task of so many people. So what is it? It is actually a distributed leadership. It is about those of you who are followers of nature. Let me take you there and ask you to visualize. I'm sure those living in Karachi particularly would have noticed that come October and November, a lot of birds travel from Siberia, a 5,000, 6,000 mile journey to the warm waters of the Persian Gulf or Arabian Sea. And they're all coming in this V formation. Okay, so it's an optical illusion of sorts when you're looking at it, because it gives a sense that there is one bird leading the flock. If you were to focus it on that, you would notice that no, it's not the case. It is continuously moving in a V formation, but the bird from behind is actually moving forward, and the bird in the front takes a back seat. It is an alternating leadership model. How is that possible? It's possible because what was said this morning by one of the speakers, that the nuclear facility that we had, and he said that everybody knew the purpose of that organization, from the janitor to the scientist. And that's exactly what is the idea behind this V formation of those birds. They all know what their destination is. So they are able to drive the flock and be leaders alternatively, and continuously provide for that same direction to achieve their cherished objective. So who is a leader? A leader is one who must share his destination with the people who are following him and allow them to come forward. People think that if I walk 2 steps ahead of others, I become a leader. That's not the case. Actually, taking a back seat might create a better leadership than those who are in the front taking charge. You all remember, leadership concept has come from the military to begin with, followed by religion. In the military, what is it? We all read when we were in class, I think 4th standard or 5th standard, we all read The Charge of the Light Brigade, right? By Alfred Tennyson, which there are remarks like, not to reason and rhyme, but to do and die. Okay, that's leadership. That's the military leadership. You can't argue, you can't question. But we have transformed them in the practices of management by the politicians who realized that I alone in my own capacity cannot be a leader of people. I need the advice, counsel, good advice of people around me. Okay, so allow me to take a little bit of digression in terms of trying to identify to you the missing link. You have a fair idea what's the population of Pakistan? The census put the number at anywhere between 225 to 230 million people, and a growing number at 3% or close to 3%. The guesstimates are that we are already a 250 million population. What's the dilemma of this population? The dilemma of this population is that we have got 250 million leaders. So who are they leading? Nobody to lead. So what do you need? You need followers. Following is more important than leadership. I'm sitting in an office in Tokyo, and there I'm discussing how Japan is progressing and how it's progressed so fast. So the gentleman says to me, should I give you an example of it? I said, sure, go ahead. He demonstrates the practical example. He calls up the Japanese deputy general manager of that organization into his cabin, and he says, I want you to do following steps, step 1, 2, 3, and 4, and report back to me at about 3:30. So he repeats the steps to be taken and leaves the room. Then he calls somebody from my color and background into the cubicle, and he says, repeats the same, step 1, 2, and 3, and report by 3:30. The immediate reaction that came was, what if we do the second step first and do the first step third? Option, discretion. You let that happen in leadership, it will be disarray, absolute disarray. And that is where I think the country, the organizations, the corporates need to bring in that discipline. That fine, you arrive at a consensus of a step to be taken, but once that consensus has been achieved, then there is no need to variate from it, no need to depart from it. So what leaders need is to create followers. And how can they create that? By being good followers. And that is the missing link that I wanted to identify, ladies and gentlemen, that to be a leader, you have to first be an excellent follower. If you're not a good follower of your own self, as they say, lead thyself before you would learn to lead others. So if my characteristics are in conflict with what I expect of my team to perform, then that leadership obviously will not be listened to. Classic case of a country called Pakistan. You see that dichotomy between the word, deed, and mouth happening left, right, and center. Consequently, nobody believes. Now, if the skill set improvement, as pointed out by Dr. Waheed, is only 45% in comparison to our neighborhood, which has increased more than 100%, what does that speak of? Inability to be able to translate all the good thoughts that you may have into actionable points. What is new that we have heard in terms of what is required? Nothing new. I've been hearing it since my childhood. You have heard the same thing from your childhood. So what is lacking? I mean, conveniently in the presentation this morning, now this is where the belligerence comes, and bear with me. The Honorable Minister completely ignored what I experienced as a child in this country, and I was part and parcel of that celebration. This was called the Decade of Development, ladies and gentlemen, the period between 1960 and 69, where Pakistan took a leap forward in terms of industrialization. And he did not call it the Uran at all. He moved from 1950 Uran suddenly into 1992 Uran. What about all this period? What were we doing? Sitting ducks? No. We were progressing, continuously progressing. So how can we ignore? So let's not rewrite history unnecessarily. That's the job of politicians anyway to do that. I'm going to stick back and revert back to Richard Nixon. Was Richard Nixon a great leader? Nobody would dispute that, right? Possibly after Kennedy, if there was one person who made a profound statement as the president of the US, it was Richard Nixon, a man who could think forward in terms of peace, global peace. He held out his hand to Mao Zedong, he held out his hand to Brezhnev, right, and created the détente between the Cold War ended in his era. But how did he leave the White House? In disgrace. Why? Because he was the most powerful leader, but an extremely bad follower. Okay, so what is it that one must follow as a leader? One must follow the norms of the society, the traditions of your place. Nobody in the United States of America will accept that the president will sanction a break-in into the office of competing political party. He did that. He went against the norms of the American society. When you go against the norms of the society, they throw you out. Does it mean that there's no burglary in the US? No, there are a lot of them. But for a person holding a position of responsibility and who is titled as the leader of the country, he cannot indulge in ordinary pleasures of life. He has to be above all this. He or she has to be above all this, right? That is where comes in the character of Lee Kuan Yew. As a prime minister of a nascent state called Singapore, He focused all his energies into building up people. He looked at skill development. He looked at mental development. He concentrated on the human capital because he had no physical endowments from Mother Nature. So consequently, what is Singapore? Singapore is a center of management, is a center of leadership. And what did he portray to the people? Having led them for almost 25 years, he suddenly announced, I'm resigning. I shall not contest the elections. But I would still be part and parcel of the cabinet as a senior minister to give that oversight to the new cabinet. That's leadership, taking a step back and allowing for future leaders to emerge. Now, if you quell growth of leadership, then do not expect wonders to happen in the country. They are not likely to happen. I think I have to some degree explained it. I've covered this aspect, and the servant leader concept is basically of 𝐿 because from a position of authority, he just became an advisor. I had a chance meeting with him once, and I kind of, tried to pay a tribute to him by saying that we in Pakistan are actually trying to do a lot of things to make ourselves the Asian tiger. And he responded rather negatively and harshly with me, and he said, are you trying to blame me for all your ills? And I take a back step on that. But that's where life is. Lincoln is somebody that I admire for a leader. And let me just explain. He lost something like 17 elections of all sorts before he became the president of the US. Okay, the bar elections and this election and that election. So finally when he made it, and he had very formidable competitors. So in the first cabinet that he created, he brought in all those people as Secretary of State for Treasury, Secretary of State for Foreign Relations, Secretary of State for War. He was handling a civil strife. All his competitors who were standing in election against him. So his party protested and said, what in the world are you doing, Mr. President? He said, I'm picking up the best brains for the country. What else am I doing? So look at your competition as somebody who's going to support you to progress in life. That's what hand-holding is all about, leadership. To be able to take a back seat. What's wrong with the back seat? And then correlating this, finally let me close this on the subject of how do you, okay, it's not working anyway. How do you correlate with a greater purpose in life? Now the entire dream of John F. Kennedy was to see man on the moon. He called up the NASA people sometime in 1961, 62, from what I have read, and he said, I want a man on the moon. When can you put the man on the moon? They said, give us a decade. He said, no, that's long. They said, well, it will take that long, Mr. President. He says, okay, I'm going to watch you very closely. So in one of his visits to NASA, he went behind the desk of a very low on the hierarchy individual, and he tapped on his shoulder and he said, what are you doing here in this office? He said, Mr. President, I'm trying to land a man on the moon. Relating it to the greater purpose is the quality of leadership, that every constituent knows what the direction is. And I think that is where it's important. First and foremost, in conclusion, let's try and be good followers before we try to lead others. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.